Montaigne writes of the custom of the Egyptians, who, during their elaborate feasts, caused a great image of death to be brought into the banquet hall, accompanied by a man who would call out to them and say, "Drink and be merry, for when you are dead, you will look like this." Right? This is the Egyptian anecdote. So during, as it were, feasting and banqueting, a skeleton would be brought into the banquet hall and someone would proclaim, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for when you are dead, you will look like this." I think there's a very interesting business opportunity here in relation to Manhattan restaurants. Where I think people could go in with skeletons, and I think there's potential business here. I mean, in terms of our corner of the planet, I mean, the culture, this is another topic for another lecture, but the culture in a sense which has a different relationship to death here, and I tried to talk about this when I was there, is Mexico. There's a Mexican popular culture of death, which is very different from what you find here. Los Dios de los Muertos and all the rest. That's another topic. Now, Montaigne derives the following moral from this Egyptian anecdote. And this is, I think, astonishing. He says, "So, I have formed the habit of having death continually present, not merely in my imagination, but in my mouth." He says, not merely in my imagination, but in my mouth. To philosophize, then, is to learn to have death in your mouth, in the words you speak, the food you eat, and the drink that you imbibe. It's in this way, I think, with Montaigne, that we might be able to confront the terror of annihilation. For it is finally the fear of death that enslaves us and leads us towards either temporary oblivion or the longing for immortality. Montaigne writes, this is from the same essay. These words are extraordinary, I think. He says, "He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave." He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave. The meaning of that is that slavery consists in slavery to the fear of death. It's that that keeps us enslaved. Freedom would not consist in the denial of death, but in the acceptance of our mortality. So the condition of possibility, as philosophers would say, the condition of possibility for freedom is accepting that our existence is bounded by necessity, namely the necessity, the certainty of our demise. And without that necessity, freedom would mean nothing. And that's the paradox. That's the paradox. If we had infinite terrestrial life, it would rapidly become meaningless. Illustration. Book 3 of Gulliver's Travels. The characters that Swift calls the Struldbrugs. The Struldbrugs have immortality here on earth. You can identify them because they've got a black spot in the middle of their forehead, Swift says. And he describes the life of these Struldbrugs. You find them, he says, after centuries and centuries old, leaning against the wall with no interest in life, having no understanding of what's being said, having lost any concern, any understanding of the language, any concern with what's happening. Swift's point, and for Swift this is a religious point, but we can come to that, is that an immortal terrestrial life would be meaningless. Therefore, what gives a meaning and shape to life is our relationship to our mortality.